I'm Hallie. Let's do it. We're live from the United Center in Chicago for the final night of the DNC. Right behind me here. Things are going to kick off just about 90 minutes from now. We're going to bring it to you live. You're going to see the gaveling in. We're going to bring you those early speeches as we are dipping in now from Chicago, all, of course, ahead of the biggest night of Kamala Harris's political life. The former prosecutor now making her own case to the nation when she formally accepts the party nomination for president right behind me. Listen, she is looking to define herself, define her vision, and usher in the Harris era. Also, officially turning the page for the party 1 month to the day after announcing she'd run for the top of the ticket after President Biden withdrew. And after that sprint to the convention, an even faster fall with Election Day just 75 days out, and the page starting to turn to what's next and whether Democrats can keep up the momentum they're feeling here in Chicago. We've got a big team with us. Let's start with Monica Alba, who's live for us on the convention floor. Monica, so much going on. Huge moment for Harris. We have some reporting on what she's going to say. She's really going to lay out her vision. She's going to draw a contrast with former President Trump, and she's going to try to reclaim the patriotism mantle, if you will, from Republicans, right?
Yeah, they've been building all week long to this, Hallie, and that is what we're going to see from the vice president. I'm told she's going to take a little bit from each night and some of the main speakers and try to put it together in this closing argument of what her candidacy can mean for the country, but also what she feels Americans now will have the responsibility to do if they come together and elect her, according to people close to the vice president. Now, she's been preparing for this speech for weeks. The original draft was the one that she would have been giving last night if she were the vice presidential nominee. So when that all changed and she moved to the top of the ticket, of course they made a ton of adjustments. They want to give it that heft. They want to give it that gravitas. But I'm also told that she wants to come out here and remind people, here's why I feel I'm qualified to be president of the United States. And speaking of presidents, she's going to be talking about President Joe Biden, and she's going to be paying him tribute and acknowledging his leadership and his legacy as the person responsible for why she is on stage tonight in this moment. So she's certainly going to address that. And then, yes, she's going to take on Donald Trump head on. She's going to talk about how she views him as a dangerous person in this race through the lens of Project 2025, even though GOP allies have tried to distance themselves from that conservative think tank blueprint for a Trump second term. And then she's also going to remind everybody of her upbringing, how she grew up, the fact that she worked at a McDonald's. Her late mother was such a huge influence on her life, and she's going to be speaking about that in very personal terms as well. And Hallie, she's been practicing all week long. She's been showing sections of it to key trusted people, performing in front of her husband, of course, the second gentleman who had his own turn earlier in the week. But overall, this is a person who has given thousands of speeches and been on teleprompter for years. So in terms of that and the mechanics of the speech, she's not worried about. They are saying she's very, very ready to meet this moment. Will it be very late? Will it go on very long? Well, that's up to the potential surprises that could be in store here still tonight on the final evening, Hallie.
Can I tell you what's interesting, Lon? Just looking behind me here, I'm seeing, we've always seen delegates sort of be coming in at this point in the evening here. It's 5 o'clock Eastern. The convention programming begins in just about 90 minutes. It's, to my eye, looking more full than it had been. And I'm also seeing a number of delegates, it looks like wearing white, the women's side. We've seen this before at other political events, Monica, the idea of support of the suffrage movement here. Are you picking, is that like a thing that was planned or just a coincidence?
It honestly seems like something that certainly has been coordinated because we are seeing so much of it. And this was something I got to tell you, 8 years ago, I was covering Hillary Clinton at the Philadelphia DNC, where that was the intended message for Thursday evening's address as well. So I think this is something that generationally has become a message to a female nominee like we're going to see tonight. But to that point, Hallie, so interestingly, the VP has not leaned in as much on the gender significance of what it would mean. She has acknowledged the historic nature, again, of her candidacy, but she's letting other people do that for her, and that is what we're going to see tonight, sort of teeing her up, but she's not leaning into that as much because there are many barriers that she would potentially break if she is elected tonight. So there will be a nod to that in terms of gender, in terms of race, but it won't be the defining message of her speech because she's going to argue it's not about me, it's about all of the Americans she hopes she can serve, I'm told. Hallie.
Monica Alba in the thick of it there on the floor as things get ready to kick off for the last night of the Democratic National Convention. And to do it with us again for night number 4, Chuck Todd here with us in the booth. Jen Psaki is joining us as well. Chuck, let me start with you, because after the convention, we're going to start the sprint to the finish. Right? And this is the moment where, traditionally, right, around and after Labor Day, Americans are tuning in, they're engaging. I know your theory of the case is that Americans started engaging about a month ago, right? When
the second the switch
That's
happened.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
How does the Harris campaign, how do Democrats keep up some of the energy we've been talking about a lot here for the next 75 days?
I just wouldn't stop. I think it's more of doing the nonstop barnstorming. You know, what the other big change in this ticket is you now have a candidate that can do 3 or 4 events a day. Joe Biden couldn't. That was a huge problem the campaign was having. Kamala Harris can. You know who struggles with doing multiple events a day? Her opponent, Donald Trump. So it's an opportunity here, and I imagine, I'll be curious if there's going to be, there's different ways of doing this. I remember Gore and Lieberman did a riverboat tour at the time. All of the swing states were along the Mississippi River.
That's right. You heard Senator Klobuchar talk about all the key states.
And it was a huge, and I remember Karl Rove admitting after going, boy, that was brilliant. He goes, they got to hit markets we didn't get to hit because our plane was too big to land in those towns. It was fascinating, the little things like that do matter, but it allowed the momentum to keep going through the weekend. And look, that's one of the conventions I've been thinking about. How does this convention compare to others? There's this reminds me of a combination of 2 other conventions where the Democratic ticket came in sort of nervous and behind, and the convention itself seemed to propel and serve as jet fuel. Bill Clinton's in '92, Al Gore's in 2000. Now, Al Gore ended up not winning. But people forget he was really losing before that convention, and he really was able to change the tone. So it's about not stopping. Like, it's going to be tempting to take a few days off. Traditionally in the past, some nominees have.
Right.
I don't think there's time. I mean, Tim Walz said it himself. He quoted Warren Zevon, you'll sleep when you're dead.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the momentum they should keep going, where it's just they're showing up, and, maybe they go have a little fun. Maybe they barnstorm Orlando and Miami just to mess with the Trump campaign. Maybe they do a little dabble here at the end of August, early September. But really, they did a bus trip in Pennsylvania before they got here. I imagine we'll see something in Michigan pretty soon. But those are the things that they need to keep doing. They can't stop, because I do think they've got energy on their side. College campuses are opening up now. This is an opportunity for them to get keep their coalition engaged.
So, Jen, is that how you'd advise the vice president if you were on her team, telling her that? Would you say, hey, listen, don't take that downtime? You know she's going to have to debate prep here over the next couple of weeks before that September 10th debate. But would you tell her, get out there, be out there, somebody should be out there every day?
1,000%. And I would just add on to that. One of the benefits of coming out of a convention is that the country was just introduced to Gwen Walz, who was crying and laughing and had such relatable responses to so many of the speeches. Get her out on the trail doing her own events. Obviously, Governor Tim Walz has become a superstar among the Democratic Party, and one who can really connect with the football-loving Americans out there who may still be deciding who they want to support. Doug Emhoff gave a great speech. So if I were them, you have these 4 principles. Get them out in the country in places where people can connect with them, where people can feel like they're touching and feeling them. And yes, don't stop, because it's not that many days left. And if you're them, you're well aware of that. She's actually been reminding people of that at events. There was an interesting moment at her rally in Wisconsin where somebody said, you've already won. And she said, we haven't won yet. And that's almost one of their challenges, is reminding the Democratic base and reminding their core supporters that this is going to be a grind, and it's going to be close, and nobody can be complacent.
So, Jen, but before we get there, right, she's got to get through tonight and her speech and these remarks here to a room that is going to go bananas for her. If the week is any precedent, and if the programming for the Democrats tonight is any indication of how they're planning to set the table, what does she need to do? In other words, tomorrow morning, when you're talking about the speech last night, what does success look like for sort of pundits, analysts, Democrats to be saying?
Well, it's no more complicated, Hallie, than how people feel when they're watching it. So people say, yes, there'll be policy in it, but it's not a policy speech in the sense that it's not a State of the Union laying out your agenda. It's a vision speech. It's about how people feel about what you're presenting in terms of the choice you're offering to the country and what your vision is for leading the country. There are a number of pieces, and Monica touched on this, that I think we've seen a lead up to this moment where there is a reframing and attempt to reclaim proclaim freedom and defense of rights.
Yeah.
I would expect that to be a central theme in her speech. She also has been projecting joy. That's the kind of the theme of their this ticket. I would expect that to be sort of a part of the vibe of this speech. But there are also moments that have helped propel her onto the scene effectively, like how she talks about abortion rights. And I think that will be a passionate and important part of the speech, and the contrast with Trump. Now, over the last couple of days, and before that, I should say, there's been a real shift in how Democrats, this ticket, big prominent elected officials or former elected officials like Barack Obama talk about Trump. It's less he's an authoritarian dictator who's going to bring down our country and it will be all over as a democracy. That may be true. It's more belittling him and making him small and making him seem kind of self-involved. That is a core message that's shifted.
The bad ex-boyfriend, if you will.
If you will. The guy who's blowing the lawnmower.
That's not me. That's Hakeem Jeffries, what he said.
Yes, that's what Hakeem Jeffries said, exactly. And what Barack Obama said, which is the guy blowing the lawnmower, the leaf blower outside of your window. That, I expect that to be the kind of the thematic and the feeling of how she goes after Trump.
Jen, I think you can stick around. Chuck, I think you can stick around. Give me a second, because somebody has just slid into the seat next to me that I know wants to get in on this conversation, and that is the former Democratic senator from Alabama, Doug Jones. Senator, it's good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Let me bring you in here to what we've been talking about, and what Vice President Harris needs to do tonight. What do you want to see from her to reach out to some of those persuadable voters, independents, as we saw, for example, Oprah Winfrey and others do?
Sure. Look, I think she just needs to seal the deal about everything that's been going on here. I mean, we have seen every speaker, one after another, speak to America across the board. This group, that group, across the board. You see it in different parts of the country. She needs to seal that deal. She needs to give, as Jen said, her vision for America. This is a time over the last month we've hit a reset button. Democrats have hit a reset button, so has America. Hit a reset button to try to look at and examine the policies, but also show the leader that she is, the leader that I know she is. I think that'll come through loud and clear tonight.
So part of laying out her vision is obviously going to be, we don't expect this to be a policy-heavy speech, but that will certainly be woven in. And we're seeing that in some of the programming tonight, specifically on the issue of gun violence, which has taken a pretty prominent time slot, right? A pretty prominent evening slot here at the Democratic National Convention. You're going to see gun violence survivors, advocates. We're showing them on screen. Former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, who was almost killed in a shooting. You're from a state where the Second Amendment is super important. Both you and Tim Walz have talked about your support for the Second Amendment, while also the need for gun reform legislation here. What would your advice be to her and to the campaign on how to talk about this issue?
Just mimic what Tim said.
Do what Tim Walz did.
Exactly. I mean, one of the things that I got to tell you, I have been so happy about with this convention are the things that Democrats in the South have been talking about for a long time. We have reclaimed the flag. We have reclaimed patriotism. We have reclaimed freedom. And we can actually talk about people who like to hunt. That film had Tim Walz shooting a pheasant or a bird as he went across. We can do those things, and we should not run away from that, because there's nothing inconsistent with trying to save lives and still enjoying hunting and sporting shooting. There's nothing inconsistent about that. I think she may talk about that a little bit. But she's got a vice president who can really talk to people across America about that. I want her tonight to really talk about her experience as a prosecutor, making the case, how she can prosecute the case against Donald Trump in the eyes of the largest jury that can ever be, and that's the American people.
You have also called, and we said this at the top of the show, if the theme at the beginning of the week was pass the torch, it has shifted to turn the page. And tonight is the cementing of the Kamala Harris era for the Democratic Party. You called President Biden's dropping out of the race, withdrawing from the ticket, bittersweet. We've seen, for example, former President Obama, former President Clinton, both of them nod to President Biden and his service to the country here. What role do you think he should play over the course of the next couple of months?
I had this very conversation with him a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, tell me everything about it.
This is my opinion, and I told him this. I think he ought to be out there. The fact of the matter is, people had questions about Joe Biden's age and whether or not he could serve a full term. But they've never wavered in their love for Joe Biden, especially Democrats. He can get votes out. You saw that happen when he appeared with Kamala Harris the other day. I think one of the huge mistakes that Al Gore made was not using Bill Clinton at the time. I think he needs to be out there, and he can go into places. He could go with Tim. He can go into places that the vice president doesn't need to go, but go in there and draw those crowds, keep that momentum going, remind people of everything he's done, remember that 50-year service, and importantly, remind people about how he has brought our allies together to defend democracy around the world.
So even with his favorability rating where it is, you don't think he'd be a drag?
Not at all. Not at all. I think he is. I think that favorability rating is going to go up and up and up, so that at some point it's certainly not going to be a drag, and I think it's going to be a real positive.
So what did he say when you suggested that he should get out there a bunch over the course?
He listened. He does what Joe Biden does best. He listened. So I don't know if he'll take my advice or not. I've given him a lot of advice over the years, but I dare say that he took a lot. But I want to say one thing about how to keep this going. Chuck had great answers about everything that needs to be done. So did Jen.
That she's got to get out there. She's got. But
here's how I would suggest that the campaign do that. Put up signs everywhere, in the buses, in the campaign headquarters, that just simply says, remember 2016. Because in 2016, people were already trying to get their reservations for Inauguration Day, and they let their foot off the gas. Remember 2016 and keep this going. If we can do that, this momentum is going to carry forward through November.
Well, you're not going to like this next question then if you're not going to try to count your chickens before they hatch, but I have to ask you about some of that reporting that suggests that you are being considered for a potential AG role in a Kamala Harris cabinet. We heard those same rumors back in 2020 after President Biden won. Has the campaign approached you at all? Would you consider that?
Chuck, did you remember me getting you to autograph that baseball for me several years ago? You know, it was great seeing you in the hotel the other day. You know I'm not going to
answer that. Wow, he's avoiding you, Hallie.
I mean,
look
it's
at
a
that.
dodge.
He looked right past
Since
you.
Chuck Todd is here, Chuck Todd taught me you always ask the same question 4 times. That's the magic. Is it 6 or 4?
It's 3 at minimum.
All right.
You know.
I'll ask one more time. Would you even consider it?
Look, I want to make sure that my friend Kamala Harris has a successful presidency. I'm going to answer just like I did back in 2020. Okay. I want to do whatever I can to make sure she, 1, gets elected, and 2, has a successful presidency.
Senator Doug Jones. Senator, it's great to see you. Thank you very much for being on with us here. Where's your seat? You're with the Alabama delegation?
With Alabama. Yeah, I'm a delegate this time, so I'm down there in the delegation.
All right.
It'll be fun.
Hooting and hollering, I'm sure.
Hooting and hollering.
Thank you very much. Let me bring back in Jen and Chuck there for a second. I mean, Chuck, you heard him, right? That she's got to get out there, that he wants to see President Biden out there. Do you think that's the right move, or do you think that could be risky?
I don't know. Look, it's up to the campaign to figure out where Joe Biden's going to be helpful or not. There's an argument to be made that he's not as helpful because she wants to sort of, while she may adopt a similar governing philosophy, the new versus old, the turning the page aspect here, I would argue. So I don't know that I don't expect to see Joe Biden out a lot. Okay. Look, Al Gore had a similar challenge in 2000, and he didn't have Bill Clinton out a lot. There's been debate over the years among Clinton allies that was a mistake. I don't think it was. I think the reason Al Gore got as close as he did is because he found a way to show some distance and that vice presidents have to do that because you got to be your own person.
That's right.
You got to show you're going to be your own president. Look, you didn't see Barack Obama out a lot on behalf of Hillary Clinton. Now, maybe that was a mistake, and maybe that should have been done more. But I'm skeptical that Biden is helpful right now. Maybe towards the end. Maybe if his numbers are recovering a little bit. But I look at it, he's got one job. The best thing he can do for her is get that ceasefire deal. Because if I believe that outside events work against her, many of the outside events that could happen in the next 70 days, war between Iran and Israel, that would not, I could see a lot of swing voters suddenly wanting to gravitate to a former president in a time of uncertainty and instability. I worry about economic shock, say the commercial real estate industry we know is hanging on by a thread. What if that downturn happens in the next 60 days? So if I'm her, I want Joe Biden doing the job. I think he helps more doing his job as president than he does on the campaign trail.
You know, Jen, Chuck said something interesting, as he often does, but he talked about if there is a time to deploy President Biden, it's maybe towards the end, and kind of that closer role. What's been fascinating to me is seeing somebody like Oprah Winfrey, with the enormous star power that she wields, somebody who in so many ways was preaching the political gospel to this room last night, coming out now in August, not in October, not in early November. It does feel a little bit like perhaps there are some lessons being learned from the Harris campaign as compared to, for example, maybe Hillary Clinton back in 2016, when some of those stars came out right towards the end and perhaps it was too little too late. What say you? Well, look,
I think having Oprah Winfrey speak at a convention is great for any party who's going to have Oprah Winfrey. I also, though, think that there's very particular moments that will work for someone like Oprah Winfrey. I don't think she's going to go do 20 campaign events. She's going to pick this moment. Maybe she'll do something else. I'm not entirely sure. I would say one of the lessons learned that's even more important than the celebrity one, though, is that you have to show up in all the places, kind of where we started this conversation. And that is one of the things, if you look back at 2016, I mean, think about how many times that the Harris has already been to Wisconsin, right? Wisconsin is a state that the Democrats need to win. It's been won only by less than 1 point, as we know, in the past few presidential cycles. So for them, I think it's less about celebrities. It's great. It's energizing. They can raise money. It's more about showing up and having the right people show up in places. So using all of these popular governors, former presidents, people who are willing to do stuff to show up in places to energize and engage people, especially early voting, as we all know, is starting in a couple of weeks in some of these key states.
That's right. Jen Psaki, great to have you on. Chuck Todd, great to have you as well. We'll be checking back in with both of you throughout the course of our night during our special coverage here on NBC News Now. On the other side of the political aisle, you have former President Trump on day 4 of his own battleground blitz, trying to counter-program convention programming. And here he is today. This is him in Arizona visiting the border just moments ago. Remember, immigration is an issue that Republicans see as a liability for Democrats here. Given the latest polling shows he leads Kamala Harris by about 5 points on that. Vaughn Hilliard is with us now. You know, Vaughn, the former president's been saying all week at his different events, at his different stops, that he's like, hey, they mention me more at the DNC than talking about crime or immigration. There has been, of course, a discussion of immigration. You heard it from Tom Suozzi last night. You're probably going to hear it from Senator Mark Kelly tonight, somebody who's had an interesting position inside the party on the border, given, you know, his role as leader of a border state here. Talk us through the dynamic at play.
Right. I was actually covering Mark Kelly in his re-election bid for the Senate in 2022. And at the time, I asked him about the fact that at the time there was a record number of migrants coming in to the United States. And sort of his criticism was that he was urging the Biden administration to do more and focus more attention and provide more resources to the migrant crisis and the number of individuals who are coming into the United States. And that is where, when you look at polling, and this is not just polling right now, which again shows that immigration is at the forefront of voters' minds, but this has historically been an issue that Republicans have done well on, not only in 2016, what is a pivotal issue for Donald Trump, but also going back to state races. This is, I think, when you're talking about immigration, you see the number there, 51% believing that Donald Trump is best positioned, as opposed to Kamala Harris, to address the border issue here. And I think at the same time that it's worth noting that ever since earlier this year, when this bipartisan Senate border security package was not approved, in large part due to Donald Trump calling up fellow Republicans and urging them to turn down the bill and not approve it. It led to Joe Biden signing executive orders that led in the recent months the number of border patrol encounters with border crossers to decline. And so I think that this is really a moment here where some of the numbers for Donald Trump are perhaps not politically beneficial to the argument that he's making that the Biden-Harris administration are not addressing immigration when we see the number of migrants coming across the border going down. At the same time, he is wholly understanding that polling indicates that this is still a major issue for voters across the country.
Vaughn Hilliard, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Let's stay in Arizona with some breaking news of a manhunt apparently happening now. A manhunt for a suspect who police say is wanted in connection to a threat to kill a presidential candidate. Remember, obviously, former President Trump was in that state at the border with Mexico, according to what 3 officials are telling our team. Tom Winter is following this story for us. Tom, what is going on? What is happening here? Because the former president at his event alluded to some sort of unsafe issue. It was rather vague, but what can you tell us?
Right. So basically, the Secret Service decided to let the president or former president go on and speak today at this planned event in Arizona, as you suggested there, Hallie. Local law enforcement officials and the local sheriff's department say that they're looking for a Ronald Lee Servid. He's described as a white male, approximately 6 feet tall, 220 pounds. He has multiple warrants out for him in connection with failing to register as a sex offender, as well as DUI-related offenses. They then included in this notice, and we're looking at it right here, that Servid is being sought as an investigative lead for threats to kill a presidential candidate. Now, 3 law enforcement officials who've been briefed on this investigation and what is going on there tell us that, in fact, that threat that was made, at least one online threat, was directed to former President Trump. And obviously, in light of what happened on July 13th with the attempted assassination, that certainly gets law enforcement's attention, would have gotten it on July 12th or July 11th. So they did make the decision, I think, based on a host of things, that they knew who this individual was. It happened at an airport, and I think they felt that they had a safe enough of a perimeter that this event could go on. Also, I think the Secret Service is probably pretty acutely aware of the underlying details of this case, we are told, and so they were in a position to make an assessment here.
Tom Winter, thank you very much for that. Keep us posted as you get any developments, please. We've been also showing you, of course, what's happening here, not along the border, but in Chicago, as the room is filling up for night 4 of the Democratic National Convention. You're going to want to stay with us because we're going to take you live to the floor next as folks are ramping up to the start of the programming. In just about 60 minutes from now, we will bring it to you live when it happens. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back to NBC News Now. I am Jacob Soboroff, live from the floor of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, Illinois, here in the United Center, as the anticipation continues to build for the last biggest, and according to the delegates here, the best night of this convention, with Vice President Harris set to take the stage as the official nominee as the Democratic candidate for President of the United States of America. It is a historic evening here with Vice President Harris potentially poised to be not only the first woman of color, the first woman president, female president of the United States of America, but it's a special moment here for people, not just in the Illinois delegation because of what we heard from former President Obama and Michelle Obama, but what President Biden said, the passing of the torch from this administration, the president, to the next. And I want to give you guys a little bit of a peek at what's going on down here on the floor as we wait for the program to start this evening. This is the Illinois. How are you? This is the Illinois delegation. We didn't even talk about saying hello, but what's your name?
I'm Dr. Geneva Norman.
It's so nice to see you. Illinois, right? Am I right?
Yes, absolutely.
What was
Such
it
a
like
pleasure
for
to be
you?
here.
Just out of curiosity, it's a pleasure to see you too. To see former President Obama, Michelle Obama, and then last night Governor Tim Walz take the stage here in what is really some history being made.
What I wrote was there simply are no words, absolutely no words to describe how fantastic and wonderful it was.
What we continue to hear is sort of a message from that stage about get out and do something. That was Michelle Obama's message. Governor Walz really encouraged people to go take action. What does that mean to you?
Well, for me, I'm old. I'm almost 80 years old.
Stop it.
Oh, yes.
80 years young.
Okay, whatever you... I love you already. Absolutely. So I'm telling you, I'm going to do every single thing I can. I'm going to work on this campaign. I worked on the Obama campaign.
How does it feel? What's the difference between, I mean, you know, this is the city where President Obama declared victory, where he's from, where him and Michelle Obama lived for so much of their lives. I mean, what is the significance of that to you, to have been there for that and not be here for this?
I just can't tell you how thankful I am to even be alive to do this. So in my lifetime, someone who has lived through some very difficult times through the civil rights movement, where people were not even thought of for these kinds of things, then to see our President Barack Obama and Michelle, that fabulous, fabulous Michelle, and now this, Kamala, oh my gosh.
It's history, isn't it?
Wait a minute. Let me say this right.
Yeah.
Kamala. Kamala.
You got it.
Okay.
You got it. I know you're going to get it. I mean, everybody's going to get it right after tonight, right?
Right, and we're thankful for you, too.
I appreciate you. Thank you very much. Let's talk a little bit about, and as we continue to walk around the floor here, let's talk a little bit about who's going to be speaking tonight. It's not just Vice President Harris. There will be some familiar faces to all of you as well. Reverend Al Sharpton, a familiar face to everyone here at NBC News. Adam Kinzinger, the Republican congressman who so forcefully spoke out against former President Trump during the Trump administration. Roy Cooper, and then, of course, Vice President Harris. We've seen her a couple of times here in the convention hall over the course of the last 4 days. We saw her in Milwaukee at that simultaneous rally when the convention was going on here in Chicago, but we have not seen, and we don't know yet exactly what the tone and tenor of her speech will be. We're going to get a little bit into that in just a second, but let's continue to see what's going on over here. How's everybody doing?
Hey, we're doing great. We're doing great. Excited.
Are you feeling good?
They're feeling good.
California delegation, is that where we're at?
Yes, you are.
And this gentleman as well. Come over here. You said you're from the Bay Area?
Yes, I am.
So am I.
Are you Bay Area?
Bay Area.
California Central Valley.
You Central Valley.
These are my people, ladies and gentlemen. As a fellow Californian, don't hold it against me. I'm from Los Angeles, though.
I live in California. I'm in Vallejo, right next door to Napa Valley, and we are fired up, ready to go. We're ready to work, and we're so excited to be here and seeing Kamala. She's my sorority sister, going into office. We're going to take it all the way.
Can you imagine a Californian as president of the United States? Can you imagine a Californian woman of color as president of the United States?
Well, we're not going to have to imagine much longer, are we? It's going to become a reality.
There you go. So it's what people, and just real quick, how do you feel? You were here for Obama 2008, 2012. Now you're here for this.
Oh, those conventions were amazing, especially 2008. Inspiration and joy from that convention, I'd say here is matched. This is just such an expression of joy and inspiration brought on by Kamala and Tim Walz. We're just loving the time here, and we think it's going to spread to the rest of the country.
And that's, thank you very much, you guys. Really nice to meet you. That's what everybody, yes.
Can I take a selfie?
We're going to take a quick selfie. We're live on the air, but come on, let's do it. Ready? Live? What's your name? Where are you from?
Oops, I am from Highland Park, Illinois. I'm the mayor.
Stop it. That's where my dad's from.
I was going to say, is your dad related to Bill Soboroff?
Probably. Thank you very much.
Soboroff?
Nice to see you.
Peter Soboroff?
Yeah, probably. I don't know. Nice to see you. Thank you, Mayor. Come on this way, guys. So there's a person over here who I know will have more insight than anybody into what's going to be happening tonight. There she is, Yamiche Alcindor. Let's get over here. Yamiche, it's like a, you want to take a selfie with her? Okay, do it. Guys, Yamiche Alcindor is here. She's going to do one of his favorite journalists. She's going to do a quick selfie. But I know Yamiche has been...
Awesome. Thank you.
See? Awesome. Thank you. That's nice. I know you've been doing, hi, first of all.
Hello.
I know you've been doing a lot of reporting.
I'm happy you found us.
I know. I'm sweating already. I know you've been doing a lot of reporting into what the Vice President's been doing to prepare tonight, sort of what the tone and tenor of the speech is going to be. And you've also been talking to a lot of people about sort of how they feel about this moment. Let's start with the speech.
So she has been, Vice President Harris, meticulously preparing for this. This is going to be the biggest speech of her career. And she's been going to Howard University for debate prep sessions and for speech sessions. And one source told me she's going over every comma, every word in this speech, like a prosecutor would do. And I'm told that she has three big goals. The first is she wants to talk about her personal background, talking about her mother who told her, you might be the first, but you don't want to be the last. Also, she wants to talk about
her mother.
An immigrant from India. She also wants to really talk about her professional background as a prosecutor. And then she wants to also contrast her views for America with the views of Donald Trump, saying he's wrong for America. And then the last thing she wants to do is really be rooted in patriotism. She wants to say, I'm going to be a president for all people. She understands, of course, that this is a historic moment as a black woman and a South Asian woman, but she wants to also just lean into the idea that she's for everybody and she's qualified for this job.
We heard a little bit about how President Clinton kind of tore up a version of his speech after he saw what was going on the floor here over the course of the last couple of days. Is that what's happening with Vice President Harris, or has she been sort of consistent in the preparation for this and been, she's known her message coming into the convention?
So I was told that the speech was largely done on Tuesday morning, but that she's been tweaking, she's been looking at the arc of the convention is one way one person put it to me, and that she understands that this is going to be sort of the culmination. So she's taking the vibes of the room, taking the vibes of the other speeches. And I also asked, well, how much do we think she's going to actually stick to her prepared remarks? And I was told she is going to largely stick to her prepared remarks, but she's going to be ready to really really respond to all of the energy that we're feeling today.
Have you heard anything? I haven't. I mean, I don't know for sure. Any rumors, anything about potential surprises tonight?
Okay, I've been clearly trying to calm down and not think about the B word, which of course would be Beyonce, right? Hello, Beyonce out there. If you are coming, tell me, text me.
She's a big NBC News Now fan.
But we're, as of right now, I've been told that there's some surprises coming. We saw Pink rehearsing earlier, but we're not quite sure if there are going to be other surprises. I will tell you one other thing, because I think it's important. When we go back to the speech, she's going to be praising Joe Biden. She's going to be praising and really saying that she's grateful for the role that the president has played, because she sees him as someone that she loves, but also as someone who elevated her. He picked her to be his VP, and then he endorsed her in this tough moment where he was dropping out. So she's really going to spend some time in this speech also talking about the legacy of Joe Biden.
I've been reading some of your reporting, and I saw you've been talking to some bold-faced names, including, I think, Pramila Jayapal, Representative Pramila Jayapal, about sort of what this moment means. What are you hearing from folks like her?
Well, what's really interesting is I wanted to go and talk to women who are history makers themselves. So Pramila Jayapal was and still is the first Indian American elected to the House of Representatives, and she said she's so excited to see someone of Indian heritage, a woman of color, who's qualified, again, underlining that qualified, that to really be in this moment and see sort of a vision of America that looks like other people, that also resonates with her. I also talked to April Verrett. She's the first black president of the SEIU union, a large union. She said, the little girl inside of me is screaming, is what she told me. So there really is going to be this moment where so many black women, who are the backbone, by the way, of the Democratic Party, the most loyal voting bloc for the Democratic Party, they're going to see themselves reflected in this ticket in a way that they never have before. And that means a lot for so many women here.
Yamiche, amazing reporting as always. I'm glad that I found Yamiche, because it's always a challenge out here. We'll see you later. I'll find you again on the floor later tonight.
Yes, and of course, more selfies. I'm sure you're going to have a bunch of selfies.
What do you mean? Look, he wants to take one with you right now.
No, I want you, man.
Okay, wait, come on, get Yamiche. I'll be right back.
I talked to you the other night.
I know, I remember. We're live on the air. Give me 1 second. Yamiche, thank you. Guys, stay tuned to NBC News Now, because we have a lot more coming up. This is the final night of the Democratic National Convention. I'm here on the floor in Chicago, Illinois. Vice President Harris will be making her big speech in just a matter of hours. Don't go anywhere. Keep it locked. You're watching NBC News Now.
Welcome back to NBC News Now's special coverage, live here from night for the DNC. Don't adjust your television. It's still 2024. I'm Chuck Todd. Hallie Jackson will be right back. But first, a short time ago, a group of about a dozen uncommitted delegates holding a press conference from an ongoing sit-in that's taking place just outside the United Center here, but outside the security perimeter. They're reiterating their request to have a Palestinian American speak at the convention tonight. They're demanding an answer from DNC organizers by 6 p.m. local time. Take a listen.
I'm still holding out hope until 6 o'clock that they will course correct. We came here to amplify what's happening in Gaza, to call for a permanent immediate ceasefire, to call for an arms embargo.
Joining me now is NBC News' chief Washington correspondent, Andrea Mitchell. And I'm sort of like, I'm trying to understand this threat here. What leverage do these protesters have? I understand they're frustrated. This has been a big fizzle for them. They've not had as many people show up as I think they thought they would have.
These are not the protesters.
I understand that, but I think they were hoping
delegates from Minnesota.
I think the delegates were hoping that the protest would be strong enough that it would give them some sort of leverage, and they don't really have it. So how does this resolve itself?
Well, it's an interesting context, because I've interviewed several of them this week on the floor, and they say that they are distinct from the protesters, that they would not do that. They are trying to work within the system. They don't want the protesters
to give them a bad name.
Yeah.
Are they worried about
that? And they've been negotiating, quote unquote, with the Harris campaign all week. And the Harris campaign, I've talked to them. I talked to Michael Tyler on our show, on my show this morning, and what they say is, look, you know, Keith Ellison, the Attorney General from Minnesota, who speaks for them, but he doesn't really speak for them. He is more sympathetic to the cause, but what they want is a Palestinian speaker on the convention tonight, for some congressperson to give up their time. Cori Bush spoke for them and spoke at this little protest. So they've been sitting in. They were there overnight. And where they are physically, interestingly, is right outside the arena where we are right now. But they have delegate passes So they're inside the perimeter. They're right outside where, you know, sort of where the trailers are, networks. And I guess the only leverage they might have would be to try to disrupt one of the planned speeches tonight by shouting out, as they do at Kamala Harris's rallies, as they did trailing Joe Biden throughout this campaign.
I've had some reporting down there on the floor. The DNC has been so concerned about a disruption that there are, call them minders?
Hall monitors.
Yes, I would say hall monitors, minders, that are basically keeping an eye on two delegations, Michigan and Minnesota, that have these uncommitted delegates. And it seems this does not look like a convention that's going to willingly put a Palestinian American to talk about this on stage tonight.
And Kamala Harris recently appointed an envoy to the Muslim American community, who is a Berkeley Law classmate of hers, someone who worked in her office. And so she's been trying to show some outreach. I have to tell you, my reporting from U.S. officials in the State Department, the NSC, is that she certainly has been more forward-leaning within the National Security Council than has the president, certainly, and his national security team. And they acknowledge that now, that she saw the civilian death toll as a calamity and spoke about it internally earlier than they did, and also externally in Dubai and in Selma, Alabama in March. So she has been more proactive, but that's rhetoric, say these people.
Let's pull back a little bit. You know, she took on that protester at a rally about 10 days ago.
Exactly.
And she basically said, you know, it's a binary choice here. You want Donald Trump? You want to help elect Donald Trump?
That's what Michelle Obama said. And nobody's perfect.
Do you think that took the air out of all this? Because as much as I see the attempts to make this bigger, and it just hasn't gotten traction. And I keep thinking about that moment, that it really sort of deflated the effort.
Really driving this, the agony, and I would call it agony, of congressional Democratic caucus members for 3 weeks while Joe Biden was going through that process of coming to terms. They thought they'd lost everything, and that has now, you know, that's over. They were so relieved it was over. That's why they accepted not an open convention. They settled on Harris. And that's the joy, the freedom, the themes of all of this. So they are so relieved that that is over, and they don't want anything to, you know, to
they don't want to take a step back. They feel like, hey, they got into the door. Let's not.
You know, we've got a chance now. We didn't have a chance before.
Well,
that's their view.
So far, this is the dog that didn't bite at this convention. We'll see. It's not over yet. Andrew Mitchell was reporting on that. When we come back, I believe we'll have my friend Hallie Jackson back with us as well. We'll have more from the DNC and the criticism that's coming from the other side of the aisle ahead of the big night for Kamala Harris.
Welcome back to our live coverage here from the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Let me take a look at the room behind me. It is filling up. The programming is set to begin in just about 50 minutes or so. We're going to bring that to you live when it gavels in. And what's interesting, if you're looking at this, you're probably noticing, hey, that looks like kind of a lot of white from the women there. Sort of an interesting note, because we've seen at past big political events like States of the Union, et cetera, some of the Democratic women wearing white in honor of the suffrage movement. It's unclear if this is coordinated or simply coincidental, but if you had the question, that's what it is. So let's talk about what's set to happen on stage tonight. You're going to see a number of speakers, including, of course, Adam Kinzinger, as there is this move afoot from Democrats to extend an olive branch to not just Republicans, but independents as well. Maybe some moderates who are on the fence, don't want to cast a vote for former President Trump, but weren't down to cast a vote for President Biden. As that happens, former President Trump is on the trail himself, and Republicans have really been describing this as less of a celebration than a coronation. Let me bring in a rock star panel to talk about it. Former Obama speechwriter and co-founder of Crooked Media, John Lovett. Also with me, Kendra Barkoff, former spokesperson for then Vice President Joe Biden. Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Where should we begin? Because there's a lot to get into, right? Let's perhaps start with this idea that this is a coronation and not a celebration. This is something we've heard again and again from Republicans over the course of the last month, as they have tried to work out their strategy on how to try to defeat not Joe Biden anymore. They had a playbook for that, but Kamala Harris, as it feels like they are working this playbook out. John?
Yeah, they're trying a bunch of different stuff. Nothing's really sticking. Trump's out there doing jazz, trying to figure out a nickname. They're confronting a very difficult reality for them, which is the Democratic Party is incredibly excited and unified. Honestly, it's strange for us. It's a weird feeling as a Democrat, not used to this this sense in which everybody's working together on the same page, fighting the same fight, really wanting to win, trying to use this convention to make the best possible case for Kamala Harris and against Donald Trump. And they're having a really bad week.
I don't want to burst your unity bubble, because there obviously is more unity than there was a month ago, but there is still this issue of the uncommitted, right? You're looking at what's happening with the delegation. There's some frustration that there's not a Palestinian-American speaker taking the stage. Should there be?
You know, look, the hostage family spoke last night, and they talked about an immediate ceasefire because everyone is suffering, and that has been their message the whole time. I think they are all on the same page with that point. Everybody wants to end the suffering, and the Poland's did an incredible job doing that. I think ultimately that is their ultimate goal at the end of the day. And, you know, whether or not the Palestinians should be speaking, that's obviously not my call, but I think everybody agrees, and that's why the hostage families are speaking that same tune.
How do you see that fitting into the frame that you're talking about?
Yeah, look, it is incredibly important that the vice president speak to the concerns of those voters, speak about the importance of a ceasefire, make sure they understand that they're represented in this convention, and that Donald Trump is not just more dangerous on every issue domestically that you could possibly think of, but also when it comes to peace in the Middle East. So, yes. Now, do I think it is possible that there could have been a speaker who spoke on the floor and spoke to those concerns in a way that also affirmed the importance of electing Kamala Harris? Yes. But whether or not there was a speaker is less important to me than over the course of the next 75 days, those voters understand the stakes and understand that they are represented.
We've heard a number of themes as it relates to issues here at the convention, and it's been interesting to see how gun violence is taking a spot on the final night of the convention with some high-profile speakers, not all of them necessarily in prime time, but still a demonstration of how Democrats see this issue being important, even though I think they probably see reproductive rights and access to abortion as perhaps more mobilizing. Talk through that dynamic here, Kendra, and how that plays into it.
Yeah, you know, it's really interesting because you had the governor last night addressing his stance on this. In the lead-in video, he showed him, you know, he's a hunter.
The governor who hunts and says he supports the Second Amendment.
That is such a rare thing for a Democrat to be able to show that he is, you know, hunting and fishing and doing all those things, but doing it in a very responsible way. And gun violence is plaguing everybody. It is not a political issue. And I do think that it is something, though, that Republicans, their message is still not right for the majority of the American people. And I think it is something that they should be addressing tonight, and I'm glad they are, because it's an important thing that Americans care about.
January 6th has come up. We expect it to again, of course, with Representative Kinzinger on stage. One of the things that we've talked about here is the idea that President Biden really cast Donald Trump as a threat to democracy. And that is not, I think, that framing has not shifted here at the convention, but it has not been the focus. Instead, you've seen this strategy, and it started with Governor Walz, as you both know, a couple of weeks ago, trying to diminish former President Trump. He's not some, in their view, ominous, larger-than-life figure. He's kind of small. He's the X. He's the leaf blower guy, right? He's annoying. He's whiny. He's a loser. It's a different rhetorical shift here. Do you think that is going to be more effective for Americans who are on the fence?
Yes. So, first of all, Tim Walz called Donald Trump weird on a little show called Pod Save America back in February, but people missed it.
Hate to tell you, we saw it on MSNBC, but okay.
Right. But look, I think Donald Trump is an existential threat, but most voters agree Donald Trump is unfit. They think he's a liar. They think he's chaotic. They have come to a conclusion about Donald Trump. And I think reminding people just about not just what a threat he poses, but just how exhausting and selfish and narcissistic he is, how much he makes everything about himself. Like, we have to deflate the threat by making him seem really small. And you make him seem small by casting him as a failed, retired entertainer desperate for the stage, and how embarrassing that is. Because not only does that mute him as a threat, it also mutes his populism, right? It makes him seem other. Whenever Tim Walz says, oh, he's so weird, can you picture him at the McFlurry machine? Can you picture him doing normal stuff? It attacks not just him as a person, but it attacks the entire kind of propaganda project of making their economic, right-wing, pro-corporate policies seem populist.
Those in the Trump orbit, though, are betting that this, what they see as honeymoon for Kamala Harris, is not something that is sustainable over the course of the next couple of months. Why are you smirking already?
Well, I just, you know, that would have been a great thing look, if they're worried about a honeymoon in February or March or April, fine. But we have 60 days, right? I think
you feel like that honeymoon can go for 3 more months.
It's a long honeymoon. I mean, it must be nice. It must be nice to get that kind of time off.
I'll take it. Bobby, please.
I think they are. Like, voting is going to begin soon. Our job is to keep this enthusiasm going. I think that is an easier job than them trying to define Kamala Harris based on a bunch of lies over the next 60 days.
Yeah, I was also going to say, I mean, it has been electrifying in here. I mean, the amount of energy that these people are then going to take back to their states, back to these swing states, and talk to their neighbors and talk to their friends and talk to everybody about how this party is trying to move our country forward. That's the goal here, right? And I think that they are really accomplishing that by the speakers and by how they're doing this convention.
Real quick, thing that has surprised you most this week? What's the thing that you didn't expect that you're seeing?
I love Gwen Walsh. You can just see that the same goodness.
Her emoting.
Yes, and it's beautiful. You just see the love of that family. That moment where Hope goes like this, and then Gus is on his feet, fucking cheering his dad. I do podcasts. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. My cynical eyes started watering. It was amazing.
How about you?
Yeah, I was just going to say the array of speakers. Fewer F-bombs, as my children would like. Just the array of speakers. You had the football team on. You've had musicians. You've had just across the board the amount of different speakers.
Kendra Barkoff, John Lovett, thank you both very much. Good to be with you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming up. Got a lot more to come here from Chicago, live from the DNC. We'll get a vibe check from the floor when we're right back in just a minute.
This is NBC News special coverage of the Democratic National Convention. Here is Hallie Jackson.
Hey there, I'm Hallie, live from the United Center in Chicago for the final night of the DNC. Look at it, the room is filling up. Things are going to kick off just 30 minutes from now, and we are going to bring it to you live with Kamala Harris, as we speak, getting ready to take the stage in the biggest night of her political life. The former prosecutor now making her own case to the nation when she formally accepts the party nomination for president right behind me later on tonight, looking to define herself, her vision, looking to usher in the Harris era and turn the page for the party 1 month to the day after publicly announcing she'd run for the top of the ticket after President Biden withdrew in that first on-camera appearance. And after that sprint to the convention over the last month, an even faster fall is on the way with Election Day just 75 days out. And the page starting to turn to what's next and whether Democrats can keep up that momentum they are feeling here in Chicago. We've got a big team with us, including Kelly O'Donnell, who all week long has had the best seat in the House up by the podium. Kelly, it's been a fascinating look at the backstage machinations as folks are coming out on stage with that key moment, what is expected to be the highlight of the entire week, set to happen just a few hours from now when Kamala Harris speaks. People know her as the vice president. They don't know her yet as the presidential nominee largely. So how is she going to change that?
Well, Hallie, this is certainly the biggest night of her life, and part of what she has to do is to give that fill-in of the picture. And as you pointed out, she has been a state office holder. She's been a United States senator. She has been the sitting vice president, and now she's a political sprinter. Just 70-some days to November, and she has to wrap all of that, biography, vision, her identity, all of the things people impose on her in terms of what they feel, how they connect to her, and ways that she can try to reach out, knowing that this has been a tight race, it remains a tight race, and she has been at the center of a swirl of new energy in the party, and she has to walk that line between being the person who is still a partner of Joe Biden. We expect that she will acknowledge, thank, and appreciate President Biden, who brought her to this party in every way imaginable, and now take the reins and move forward. So we expect the speech to fill a good chunk of the night. We think maybe somewhere in the 30-minute range or so. And there have been a lot of changes and care put to it. And part of what I've been told is that there's been a lot of the gut check, going through what she wants to say. Does it resonate in her own mind and heart to not be sort of influenced by all of the other voices that might want to shape an event of this scale in her life, to make sure that she is telling the story? Also on issues, expect big concepts about how she would define the kind of country that she would like to lead and to try to make that accessible to the people who will hear it tonight. Night 4 for us, we are seeing our way through to the finish line, and for the vice president, what a buildup of emotion. We expect Governor Walz and his family will be here to see her speak tonight. The families will be on the stage, and of course, we've had really exciting days, but we also know that the balloons that have been sealed above us for days will come flying down and drifting in to fill in the picture tonight. Always one of the most fun moments of a convention when the nomination has been accepted and the moment sealed, the balloon toss, the balloon drop, one of the great moments. That's coming up tonight. We expect great music and maybe some surprises. We're all sort of ready for that as well. Hallie?
Kelly, what's the plan to keep the foot on the gas after the DNC here? And talking to folks, I had a conversation with Senator Doug Jones, former Alabama senator, of course, who suggested he wants to see people out, full court press.
Well, there's a real desire to translate the energy and enthusiasm, which includes, according to our sources, the biggest grassroots night of fundraising last night. That certainly gives them the fuel and the resources to do more. I've also been told to expect that there will be some travel announced in the days ahead, and certainly Labor Day, which is only just a throw away. One of the big moments, of course, in terms of retail politicking, getting out there and having another big moment event. They want to get to places where they can talk about issues in those key battleground states, and we expect to hear more about what comes out of the convention when we get through tonight. Hallie?
Kelly O'Donnell. Kelly, I can't wait to see sort of the inside scoop that you get from that seat there. You're going to have a bird's eye view of all of it. Thanks, Kel. Let me bring in somebody who knows Vice President Harris very well, and that is a fellow Californian, Senator LaFonza Butler, longtime friend, of course, of the Democratic nominee for president. How are you feeling?
Thrilled.
Okay.
Really
Nervous
excited.
at all?
Not nervous at all.
Okay.
No, not nervous at all. This is the biggest night of her political career, and she's going to deliver. She's going to knock it out of the park. She's going to tell the American people exactly who she is, and I'm excited about it.
How's she feeling?
I think she's resolute. She is determined. She is confident. And she knows what's at stake. And so she is prepared to perform and to deliver and communicate, most importantly, to the American people about what's on her mind, what's on her heart, who she is, and what she believes that we can accomplish together.
One of the things that we've been having a conversation about tonight and over the course of the week is the way that this convention seems to have cemented a shift in strategy of the way that this party, this campaign, talks about former President Trump, not just as a threat to democracy, somebody who in some ways is ominous, looming large, but as somebody who's like, kind of, to quote people here, annoying, like a bad ex-boyfriend, like a neighbor with a leaf blower. Do you expect to hear that kind of rhetoric from her tonight?
Look, I think she's going to do her own version of how to deal with President Trump. I think the American people are finding it quite boring, actually. He's got one sort of way of campaigning. He is trying to ridicule his way into the presidency now for the third time, and I think it's not going to work. And I think so she is going to deal with it in the way that she does. She has made very clear that she knows his type, and she's going to talk to the American people about the difference between she and him.
Your relationship with her started about 15 years ago, right, when the two of you first met. Talk about those moments. Talk about this friendship developing and how that came to be.
Look, she was running for state attorney general, and she's from San Francisco. My union was based in Los Angeles, and she came to talk to me about how she could earn my members' endorsement. The first thing I said to her was, you got to go and walk a day in the shoes of our members, and that's how she wound up doing the work of a home care worker with Wendy Co. in Oakland, California in 2010. And our relationship has grown ever since. Big moments, and when she is thinking about running for office, she and I have had conversation. Big opportunities in my life when I have been making decisions about what to do. I have spoken to her, on several occasions. We have been in each other's lives for a long time, and I'm just excited for the American people to get to know the person that I know to be Kamala Harris.
The two of you got to a point where that trust and relationship was so sort of in place that you were an advisor to her during her presidential run the last time around, back in 2019. Can you talk a little bit about the differences that you noticed then versus now as it relates to campaign infrastructure, campaign organization? I don't have to tell you that there's been some reporting that of staff issues back when she first got into the White House here, et cetera. What do you see from the inside now as compared to a few years back?
You know, it's every campaign sort of takes on a life of its own, and so to try to compare one to the other in a different political environment is probably unfair. Okay. What I will say right now, though, about this campaign, this team that she has put together, the depth of experience that is up on this team is unprecedented. You have Jen O'Malley Dillon and the team that was already in place with President Biden, and you have the David Plouffes of the world, and the Stephanie Cutters and the Jen Palmieris who are joining that team. And I think it's going to be a fusion of all of the talent of the Democratic Party that is deeply experienced, because it's all on stake. It's all at stake.
Is there any tension between the sort of Biden old guard, the sort of Biden loyalists, and the folks that are more loyal to Kamala Harris?
Absolutely not. Okay. Absolutely not. What this team is focused on doing is winning. And it's, you know, when you're a campaigner and you're an organizer, there is a beginning, a middle, and an end to a campaign. And it is not over until you get to the end and you have won. All the ballots have been counted. There's always something that's going on in between when you're in tense moments. But this is a team that is focused on what is at stake for the American people, winning for Vice President Harris and laying it all on the line in this moment.
I covered the Trump White House back when he was in office, and one of the things that he's doing now is use the word California as an insult. That Kamala Harris is a California liberal, trying to paint her as simply too extreme for where the rest of America is. California, I think, takes some pride in being progressive, out in front in the eyes of Democrats of where the rest of the party should be. How does the vice president square that circle when there's clearly been an outreach to independents here, even moderate Republicans, as we've heard from speakers on stage?
Look, those who try to characterize California as one thing are people who are not from California. California is a lot of things. It's not just Los Angeles and Hollywood and the San Francisco Bay Bridge. It is 58 counties. It is Democrats. It is independents. It is Republicans. And it is everything in between. And what California has taught Vice President Harris about how to win and how to win statewide in a diverse state like California is how to bring people to the table. And that is the skill that is being minimized that the other side will never have because they're not interested in other people's voices. The gift that is California is the secret power to what Vice President Harris and Governor Walz are going to do to win this campaign in November.
Do you worry at all about this Democratic unity that we're seeing right now being punctured by the issue of some of the pro-Palestinian demonstrations we've seen, this push by the Uncommitted to get a Palestinian-American speaker on stage? How should the vice president navigate that?
Look, I think she's been trying to, her and her team have really been trying to navigate this very skillfully, tactfully, and in a way that articulates her values. She has been very clear that Israel has the right to defend itself, that Palestinians should be able to live free and without threat, and that we've got to return those hostages to their families who've now been facing almost a year without knowing what is the fate of their families, and making sure that we can recognize that set of values, that set of key objectives leading towards the future. I hope that we're going to be able to navigate our way and negotiate a way that is able to bring some resolution to the need to hear from those incredibly important voices. And I know the vice president is committed to that.
Senator, before I let you go, you described the vice president as resolute right now. Have you talked to her today? Have you two caught up this week at all?
Not today at all, and I hope she's not talking to anybody. I want her to be super focused on what she's saying, and so the American people can know her heart and her story. And so I have not talked to her, have not even tried.
Senator, thank you so much for thanks for talking to us. We appreciate it. Appreciate the conversation. Thanks for making your way up here.
Of course.
I want to take you now outside. You just heard us talking with the senator about these pro-Palestinian demonstrators that have been outside the United Center in Chicago at various points this week. You're looking at a live shot now at some of that happening outside the United Center where we're sitting now with organizers hoping to see a Palestinian-American speaker on stage here. Maggie Vespa is covering this for us now. Give us a sense of the scene behind you. I understand there's a news conference that's set to happen in about 45 minutes from now where we may hear more, Maggie.
Yeah, Hallie, absolutely. That's been a regular occurrence, likely on this stage here. This is the Coalition to March on the DNC. They've been holding protests and marches throughout the week. Let's walk this way so you can kind of get a feel for the crowd. This is Union Park. This is about a half mile from the United Center, and it's a regular kind of starting point for marches throughout the DNC. We've seen several here in Chicago, as you know, some of them several thousand people, some of them hundreds. This one, from what we can tell, crowd size right now kind of falling in the middle. People arguably energized by the Uncommitted delegate sit-in that you've been talking about and reporting on by the push to get a pro-Palestinian speaker on stage at the DNC. They also tell us, we're going to kind of walk a little bit faster, guys. They also tell us they're going to be listening intently, like the world will be, to the vice president's speech tonight and what she says, the rhetoric she uses about the war in Gaza. In particular, they say they really do not want to hear her. You can say a lot more kind of gathered here around this baseball diamond. They do not want to hear her use one word, and they say that word is ironclad. Back in July, the vice president's national security advisor released a statement saying that Vice President Harris's commitment to the security of Israel was ironclad. A lot of people see that as proof that her views and values do not fall in line with theirs here, and she could lose out, they say, on a lot of votes. What we're showing you right now, by the way, is the Chicago police presence. Again, this has been the only law enforcement agency that's kind of out here policing these protests, dealing with, again, thousands of demonstrators marching through the city. You can see the bike cops, you can see the trucks. Undoubtedly, we have police here in riot gear. They've been here all week, ready for these protests. Again, a lot of these have been really peaceful. We've had one in the middle of the week that got chaotic, around 60 arrests at that one. We're hoping this one, again, peaceful tonight. They're planning to march toward the United Center in a couple of hours. Hallie.
Maggie Vespa live for us outside where we are in Chicago. Maggie, thank you. Let me bring in now somebody who has joined me here at the table, the principal deputy campaign manager for the Harris campaign, Quentin Fulks. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I know you're getting your steps in here this week, so I appreciate it. Let me pick up on where Maggie left off. Do you expect that there may be a Palestinian-American speaker on stage tonight, as some of these delegates are hoping for?
Look, I think that throughout this convention, we've had a number of speakers talking on both sides of the aisle on this issue. I think that the vice president believes that it's fundamental to make your voices heard as long as that's being done peacefully. I think we've had speakers throughout this convention who have talked about the need for hostages to be released, the need for there to be a ceasefire, the need for us to end the killing that's happening in Palestine and throughout Israel and Gaza. And so the vice president has also made her position clear on this issue. And so I think it has been represented. And
so you're saying the door is closed to that at this point?
Well, I think that the programming is set.
Okay.
But I think that, again, I think the views of both sides have been represented in this. And I think that the vice president has made her position very clear on this.
Vice president's got a big night ahead of her. We just talked with one of her friends, as you just saw, Senator Butler joining us here, who said that she is feeling resolute. Is that a fair characterization? How is the vice president feeling ahead of this huge moment for her on the national stage?
I think she's feeling joyous. I think that she is ready to talk about her vision for this country. I think that she's ready to move us forward in a new way, one where everybody has a chance to succeed. And I think you're going to hear her talk a little bit about Trump and his vision for the future, but only to put that into contrast with her vision for the future. So she's excited.
So how's she going to talk about it? Because we've heard him described in an interesting rhetorical way over the course of this convention week here. From former President Obama, he's the annoying neighbor with the leaf blower. Hakeem Jeffries, he's the bad ex-boyfriend. Are we going to see that kind of sharpness from the VP?
Look, I think she's going to take a more serious approach to it. But what I will say is that I think that she's going to talk about the fact and the idea that just for you to get ahead doesn't mean that I have to not succeed, and vice versa. And I think that that is a really big agenda for her, is that there's enough opportunity here, enough for us all to succeed, but we have to do it together. And I think that's something that's really important to the vice president, and I think that that's what folks are going to hear from her tonight.
Hers is an historic candidacy, and if she wins, she would be an historic president, of course. And yet, she has not largely cast her campaign in this. By the way, literally, I think 1 month, it was a month ago today that she was out there on TV sort of talking about all this, in the month that she's been on the top of the ticket here. How is the campaign walking that line between noting the reality that if she wins, she would break that glass ceiling, a couple of glass ceilings, but it also feels like you're not leaning too hard into that. Why not? Give us some insight there.
Well, look, President Biden passed the torch because he knew that this wasn't about him. We're not talking about that because this race is not about Vice President Harris, and she knows that. This race is about America and the future. It's about our democracy. It's about the future that we're going to have together, and that's where her focus is, and that is what you see coming from the campaigns. Campaigns are embodiments of the candidates that they represent. That's where the vice president's focus is. This is not me, me, me. You've heard that on the stage. She is not me, 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 I. She's like America, 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 and that's what you're seeing from us. That's where her focus is, and that's what we're going to continue to talk about.
There are delegates here. There's folks that we've talked to who say they do appreciate the fact that she would be a history maker, that she is a history breaker. Why not give them something, too?
Well, I think that they are getting it. They're getting it just by her existing. We don't have to prove that she's anything. She is who she is, and she's the most experienced person, the most qualified person to be president of the United States, and that's what we're going to continue to convey.
Let's talk policies for a second, and two sides of the coin there, because on the one hand, there are some areas where the Democrats see real potential mobilization for voters on the issue of reproductive rights, on the issue of abortion access. It's been interesting also to see the set of speakers on gun violence. We have former, of course, Congresswoman Gabby Gifford set to speak tonight, a number of other gun rights advocates, for example. Tim Walz brought it up in his speech last night. What does it say that this focus on the gun issue is happening on night 4, the sort of biggest night of the convention? What does that say about where the Democratic Party's priorities are?
Well, I mean, I think that what we're seeing most of the time is that we have basically different views. You hear Governor Walz talk about the fact that he is an avid gun owner, but he also recognizes that people don't need an AK-47 or AR-15. He also recognizes that when there's school shootings, our party recognizes that when there's school shootings, we can't just tell people to get over it. That's Donald Trump's MO, not ours. And I think what you're seeing is a wide array of positions on this issue, but based in common sense and based on making sure we're bringing everybody to the table. And I think even with having Republicans talk at the convention, you're seeing where the Democratic Party is. We are open and embracing everybody, and everybody is coming here because our ideas, our agenda, our vision for the future, as you'll hear the Vice President relate tonight, it's super important.
Flip side of the policy coin is an issue that some see as a liability for Democrats, specifically Republicans, and that's on immigration. With former President Trump today at the border in Arizona, he will be there through the rest of this week as he's been on his own battleground blitz. We've heard the way that the campaign wants to counter this by saying, well, wait a second, Donald Trump, you're the one who blew up that immigration bill in Congress. No. But beyond that, how does the campaign, what will we hear tonight from maybe Senator Mark Kelly to try to counter the case that Republicans are making?
Well, look, I think that we have to start there. I know it's annoying to people, but we do have to start there.
Do you think people care about like a congressional bill that failed, widely?
But I think that people care about why did it fail, because they're electing somebody who is supposed to be moving it forward and supposed to do it. If Donald Trump cared about the border, then he would not have told the MAGA Republicans in Congress to kill it. But at the end of the day, Vice President Harris's record speaks for itself. She was with President Biden. She would have supported that bipartisan and strongest border bill that we've had in decades. But under her and President Biden's leadership, they have cracked down on the amount of fentanyl and drugs coming into this country. They have sent more Border Patrol agents to the southern border to make sure that the border is secure. A bill that if Donald Trump had allowed to go through and not told Mike Johnson to kill, we would have had 15 more border agents there. So again, Donald Trump is playing games. He's not interested in legislating or solving issues for people. He's only in this campaign for himself, and that is why he instructed Republicans to kill that bill. And so it is an important piece of this.
Quentin Fulks with the Harris campaign, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for
being
having
here.
me.
I got to tell you, I know you don't have to get to a seat. The delegates do, because they just came on the loudspeaker. We're about 10 minutes away from the start of the kickoff to night 4 at the convention, and folks have been asked to take their seats as we get ready for the gaveling in. We're going to bring those moments to you live. So let's get a quick check from our Monica Alba, who's down there on the floor. Okay, turn it around to look, Monica. Listen, it's filling up, and it's filling up quick for the final night.
It is, Hallie, and something that you asked me about last hour, I have more information on, and that is the fact that there are so many women in this hall wearing white, and that is obviously not an accident. As you can see here, I was just talking to these lovely delegates who were told that the DNC Women's Caucus coordinated among the different delegations to get guidance out to wear white tonight in a nod to the women's suffrage movement, of course, and in a nod to the fact that Vice President Harris, if she is elected the first female president, will break that major barrier. So we're seeing it all over the place, but according to the Harris campaign and the DNC more broadly, this wasn't something that was completely coordinated. It was a little bit more grassroots. Different grassroots organizations were popping up and saying, should we do this? Let's tell people. And then it spread word of mouth Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And I really can tell you, Hallie, looking out, when you look at kind of every single section, you see a swath of it. So that's something that's certainly going to be represented here tonight. Now, I was just running out of clothes, and that is why I am wearing a white blazer. Full truth there. But, you know, we love women, so why not?
Monica, I see a ton of people sort of crushing the aisle behind you here. That is something that, you know, we know is going to happen on this final night with so many people coming in. Has there been anything unexpected for you through the course of today that maybe we didn't think we were going to see that we're going to see? I know earlier this morning we reported Pink was going to be giving a musical performance. Democrats are really, it seems, trying to keep that like energy, momentum piece of things going.
Pink, the Chicks. I'm told there are a couple of other surprises that are still in store that have not been reported, musical and otherwise. So read into that what you will. But I think certainly, Hallie, there was no in-person convention like this 4 years ago. And that's the thing that I keep picking up on. It's like people forgot what it was like to be able to congregate, to be together, to have this collective experience. And so tonight is really the culmination of all of that, right? But at the end of the day, this is the vice president's evening, and they also want to be sure not to step on that with anything that could potentially be a more headline-grabbing moment. So that's something to consider as well. Either way, I was told by folks intimately involved in the planning, every night is supposed to be kind of upping the high wattage factor. So last night, if you had John Legend performing and you had a couple of other musical surprises with Stevie Wonder, okay. So tonight they claim that that is somehow going to be topped and that there will also be people who you've never heard of before, probably speaking tonight. People who grew up with Kamala Harris, people who know her, who aren't household names. And of course, the campaign argues those people are just as important. And at the end of the day and this evening, the vice president really then is going to talk about how the task ahead is the real important one. As soon as they wrap this up, she's going to say, we only have a matter of days and we need to get to work. And the ultimate directive is going to be what Michelle Obama said a couple of nights ago, we're told, which is, okay, we have this party, Democrats can feel united and energized, but now we have to, quote, do something. And that has been really my takeaway from all of this, is that as excited as people are, they know that this isn't some exclamation point on the entirety of the race. There's so much left to go, even though it's been one big week-long party. Hallie.
Monica Alba, we are taking a look at you, Mon, from a different angle, right there in the thick of things. I know it's a busy night for you, and it's a busy crowd. There you are. Hey, girl. Mon, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Let me bring in some folks here with me in the booth, as we are just about 5 minutes away from the start of this thing. Democratic strategist Basil Smikle, Tommy Vietor, host of Pod Save America, and former spokesperson for President Obama. Chuck Todd is here as well. Okay. Hey. Here we go. It's all happening. And Kamala Harris is in the spotlight tonight.
Yeah.
What does she need to do?
I think there are, look, we're political junkies. We consume this stuff all day, every day.
You're nerds, respectfully, right? And
we're freaks.
Yes.
Most of the country consumes like an article a month about politics.
Right.
So there's a lot of people who don't know who she is. She has to introduce herself and then tell them what she is going to do for them, how she's going to make their lives better. I've heard the speech is around 33 minutes without applause, so we'll see how long it goes. But also tonight, they need to get her on in prime time. And if that does not happen, I want to see Stephanie Cutter out there with one of those giant hooks from the Muppets pulling the people off stage.
There's been a lot about the, like, are they?
I don't buy this matters.
I was just going to say this.
Yeah. Of legacy media.
How dare you?
I'm surprised you think this is a. You know, I look at how people consume, and do you think that Michelle Obama's speech was consumed more on TikTok and the next day and the Black Jobs line, which is probably the line
of the convention.
The line of the convention. I mean, and I can't believe I'm the one saying this. Like, I don't know if that matters the way it used to.
10:50 versus 11:10. Do you really think?
No, I don't think it matters. There's been so much attention on not just this convention and how a month ago we were looking at a very different, dynamic. But people want to see her, they want to hear from her, as you said, and get to know her. And if you think about the energy in the room, also think about the fact that people are having house parties specifically to listen to her. A lot of energy on the ground.
Listen, I've heard of this tick and/or talk thing that the kids like.
I use it anthropologically to study the next.
I got two kids under 2. I need to go to bed at like 10 p.m. Or get her on stage.
Okay. Well, she's on stage.
Tommy, that's a long way from the dude we covered back in the day. 10 o'clock is when he first went out. Now he's going to bed.
Let's just dispense with the timing piece of it. Once she does get on stage, whenever that may be, right? You're talking about 33 minutes for a speech. It's not an easy thing to do, to deliver a barn buster of remarks, especially after some of the acts that have been in place from Democrats that have had this crowd, I mean, blowing the roof off the place, right? From a technical perspective, how does she do this in a way that both introduces herself, as you said she needs to do, talks about her story, talks about her vision, talk about Donald Trump, do it all in 33 minutes, not be boring, you know, and keep people's attention?
It's actually harder for the nominee. Like Barack Obama's 2004 convention speech was better than 2008 and 2012 because he told a story about himself and his values in the country, and people were like, oh my God, who is this guy? By the time you get to the campaign, you're doing your policy section. She's going to have to check some boxes on foreign policy. We're going to talk about cyber security for like a beat, right? So there's going to be some wonky stuff she has to get through. I think she needs to introduce herself, talk about her values, connect with people on a human level, and then, you know, get out.
To Tommy's point, though, there will be likely a commander-in-chief section, if you will. I mean, that's going to be something that's hugely critical and potentially for a lot of voters, Basil.
Absolutely right. So, yeah, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of some policy, but always scale that up to values. What are the values that are going to unite all of us in all of those policy decisions? And, you know, and there's been conversation about her being able to address issues of patriotism. To me, that's very important because oftentimes if you're a person of color, if you're African American, if you're an immigrant, if you criticize the government in any way, you're being viewed as unpatriotic, except maybe for the January 6th rioters. But you're being viewed as unpatriotic, and there is patriotism in wanting to make this nation better, which is what so many of us, which everyone in this arena is want to do. So reframing that and recapturing patriotism is very important.
You're looking at the box on the left side of your screen. Live look of the convention floor as we are just a couple of minutes away from the gaveling in, officially beginning night 4. And while it's all about Kamala Harris, it is not only Kamala Harris who will speak tonight, Chuck. There's also this interesting focus on some Senate candidates and those Senate down ballot races. And while I have respectfully and with love some freaks, I believe was the word you used at the table politically, let's talk about some of those things, because this is a moment here too for Democrats to get behind people like Tammy Baldwin, let's say, even as John Tester, Sherrod Brown are not even coming close to this place.
No, look, I think the biggest, one of the reasons why just about every elected Democrat was telling Nancy Pelosi to go tell Joe Biden he can't run again, it's because they saw a collapse in Democratic enthusiasm. That was the issue. The path to winning the House of Representatives doesn't go through Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. It actually goes through California and New York. What does that mean? You need Democrats to show up. And it's pretty clear that the switch, and this is something I think even the Trump campaign, I think they underestimated the power of Kamala Harris because they underestimated the thirst and hunger that Democrats had for something to believe in, for something new, to believe they could win. And, you know, this is, look, it's a huge opportunity for her. This is why I would actually be careful doing too many specifics. Don't divide your party right now. Do everything you can to keep everybody in the room, keep that enthusiasm going. So I don't expect a lot of specifics, and you know, the wonk in me says, hey, she needs to put meat on the bones, but tonight's not the night for that.
That's next week.
Exactly.
That's when she goes
Tonight is the night that, you know, and this is another reason why the way to be out there all the time. Because if you're out there all the time, even if you're not doing interviews, the voters are going to say, well, I see her all the time.
She's gaggling at the plane or whatever.
There isn't going to be that feel. If she's suddenly not around, then people are going to say, hey, I need to hear more from her.
The music is cueing now for the start of the convention, but Tommy, let me get you in because President Biden made the point that Chuck's making in explaining one of the reasons why he decided to drop out of the race in an interview after, that he was hearing from Dems that they didn't think he'd be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think if President Biden had run, my understanding from some of the polling people were seeing is that we could have lost 400 electoral votes, and we could have lost the House and the Senate, and it would have been over.
Let's get to the stage now with Mignon Moore and Texas Congresswoman Veronica Escobar ready to gavel things in.
For the final season of the convention, I am more than pleased to pass the gavel to co-chair Representative Veronica Escobar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The fourth season of the 49th Quadrennial National Convention of the Democratic Party will now come to order.
Please stand if you are able for this evening's invocation, offered by American Federation of Government Employees National President, Dr. Everett Kelly, and Imam Muhammad Abdul Alim.
Okay, so they're getting ready to begin the invocation. We're going to hear the pledge, the Star-Spangled Banner, et cetera. Boswell, I'll bring you back into the conversation here as well, as we've been talking about the importance of some of these down-ballot races in this moment overall.
New York is especially critical to this, and what I've been hearing on the ground from a lot of strategists is that this Kamala Harris being on the top of the ticket is helping everybody. It's making it close. It's bringing that enthusiasm, and this isn't just about bringing independents and disaffected Republicans. It is Democratic turnout, and they were definitely concerned that Biden at the top of the ticket was just going to tamp down turnout significantly, particularly in those suburban districts. We could talk about Long Island here. That is critical for Democrats.
Hallie, you were bringing up some of the speakers tonight that are Senate candidates. You know who wouldn't be here if this were Joe Biden's convention? Alyssa Slotkin.
Yeah.
You know who wouldn't be here if this were Joe Biden's convention? Tammy Baldwin. They wouldn't have come. I promise you. We had a couple that didn't come. And I frankly get it.
Pearl
Brown,
Jam.
Right, Sister Pearl Jam and John Tester. Understandable there, but it's a smaller number. Those that are Democrats representing red districts or red states.
Yeah.
But Tommy, I'm curious about. I think there would have been a wholesale, sort of what you saw with the Republicans. Look at how many Republicans decided not to go to the convention, at least those that are in purple states and in purple districts. So I think you would have seen a similar type of absence of major candidates, and it would have only added to the melees of the party.
I also think you probably wouldn't have seen Oprah. I don't know that you would have seen Michelle Obama.
I know you wouldn't have seen Michelle Obama. I think we all know that.
Convention, yeah.
Which brings us to sort of the broader piece of this, too, how different this convention would have looked if it was held a month ago. And it's one of these, like, thought experiments here. We don't know because we haven't lived that timeline. Go.
The single biggest campaign blunder might be Donald Trump's decision to say yes to an early debate. Imagine if he had said no. Said, no, we'll wait till September. It never happened.
But it wasn't just Donald Trump's decision to do that. It was also, of course, Joe Biden's
No, right, but
decision.
Trump could have said no.
Yeah.
Trump could have easily said, no, we'll wait till December. But, he couldn't help himself.
He's so pissed about it. I love it.
Of course he is.
He talks about it all the time.
But let's talk about debates, because here we are. It's the last night of the convention. We're talking about it, of course. But then we'll wake up tomorrow morning, and what's going to be the next thing, right? The next big primetime programming moment will be that first debate in Philly on September 10th here. We understand that both candidates have already started prep. Donald Trump may not like to call it prep, but that is what he's doing with former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, for example, among others, having these conversations. We understand that Vice President Harris has already done at least one mock session. Philippe Reines is playing former President Trump. NBC can report. What does that look like? And that test for both of these candidates, because that's not going to be a party. That's going to be a face-off.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge moment. Listen, this is a sugar high. We're in the middle of it. This will be the peak for a while. It's going to get real rough. They're going to get nasty. They're going to go low. They're going to attack her in vicious, sexist, racist ways. So just be ready. But I think Kamala Harris is a good debater. She's
a trial lawyer, guys. That's the most important. Yeah. She knows how to do closing arguments, opening arguments. This is her strength in many ways.
She's talked about this. She's got to prosecute the case against him. We are her jury in that sense, right? She said, one of the things she said when she talked just after Joe Biden stepped down is that she knows the type. And if she really does know the type, and if she is true to form, she is going to little by little dismantle him in a similar way that Michelle Obama and Barack Obama did the other night. That sort of needling of him, I'll be really curious to see how actually he then performs on stage while all of that's happening. In 2016, we saw him looming over Hillary Clinton while that debate was going on. But I'll be really curious to see how he takes it in the moment in that debate as she's continuing to needle him.
I mean, to your point, former prosecutor, we will hear her make her own case for herself tonight in so many ways. And she's drawn that thread between her experience in the criminal justice system and, frankly, Donald Trump's experience in a very different way in the criminal justice system.
That's exactly right. And again, going back to what she said when she said she knew the type, we know what she has to do. I'm not sure that she needs to sound like Barack Obama in the debate in and of itself, but I think she needs to seem unafraid and unabashed in going after him. You want to see her go after him. And she looks like she's able to do that and interested in doing it already.
Thank you both very much. We're going to take a quick pause here. Let's listen in to this sixth grader from California, Luna Maring, delivering the Pledge of Allegiance here to the audience.
Flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And the presentation of colors there, too, from the Illinois State Police Honor Guard. Somebody who was paying close attention to that Californian delivering the Pledge of Allegiance is our next guest here. And that, of course, is California Governor Gavin Newsom. Thank you so much for being with us.
It's good. I got 4 kids. I'm not sure they could have done that. So I was nervous. It was wonderful.
Okay. Let's talk about tonight.
Yeah.
You met Kamala Harris something like, I think, more than 20 years ago when you were both sworn in on the same day as mayor and AG of San Francisco, both of you respectively.
Yeah, we were friends even before that. So this is a surreal trip we've been on together.
What do you want to see so that the American people can know the Kamala Harris that you know?
Well, I mean, walking the halls, everyone said, I didn't know she worked at McDonald's. So it really does show it's not just a reintroduction. I mean, quite literally is an introduction. So I think she has that opportunity, number one. But number two, I think the most important thing, and I'll be candid with you as a surrogate out there on behalf of the Biden campaign, we were able to make, I think, a very compelling case for the success of the last 3.5 years of taming inflation and building an economy that's the envy of the world. The challenge was painting a compelling vision for the future. And what I hope to hear tonight is her compelling vision for the future, her ability to turn the proverbial page and build on what has successfully been done the last 3.5 years, but put her mark on that vision where others can feel included.
Okay, but right on that front, and I should note to folks, they're playing a video here in the room, so it gives us a second, I think, to chat without having to step on the Pledge of Allegiance or anything. You've said earlier this week that you think Harris will use this speech to not just do the things that you're talking about here, paint a picture of who she is, paint a picture of her vision, but also of what the next 4 years would look like from a policy perspective here. Do you think that picture should have been painted by now, a month in, given the compressed timeline?
I mean, she barely, we haven't even finished the convention. She may have gotten a heads-up call, a few of us did, from the President of the United States, that he dropped out just a matter of weeks ago. This has been a whirlwind for everyone. I mean, Karl Rove, I'm agreeing with Karl Rove, I thought was absolutely right, today's Wall Street Journal. Plenty of time to paint the policy details. But we also have the detailed understanding of where she is as part of the Biden-Harris administration. Over the course of the last 3 years as it relates to policy. So we have a foundation of understanding of where she's been, and now she has an opportunity to build on that. She did a little bit of that on affordability, on the issues of housing, which needs to be discussed more and more, and on the issues of prices.
I do think that the breaking news banner we should put up is Gavin Newsom and Karl Rove see eye to eye on an issue here. One of the things that you've done, along with, frankly, Pete Buttigieg, who referenced this the other night, was you've gone to some outlets that have been traditionally less than friendly to Democrats, and you've tried to make the case for Kamala Harris. Yeah. You've done that and you referred to yourself as a surrogate just now. That's what you've done in your position. How does she do that? Because she's coming under fire from the Trump campaign for not having gotten out there and taken some of those questions in those formal settings. Will she? Should she?
They'll make that decision on their own. I mean, I don't think the average person right now, folks that I'm walking into, not just here, but out on the streets, would think, boy, she really hasn't done that sit-down interview with fill in the blank. I mean, I think that's kind of a little bit of the punditry class. I think we're just talking amongst ourselves, and obviously Trump's going to make that case. He has to. Right now, he has no other case to make against her. He's flat-footed. He's spinning. He's flailing. I've never seen him for this long so unable to land a punch, let alone even figure out how to throw a punch. He's derivative of himself. He's becoming more and more unhinged. His advisors are now more publicly saying that, not just privately saying that. So, look, I think she's continuing to do what she's done. That said, no one's naive of the energy that comes from this moment, the crescendo tonight, and the realities of the next 75 years.
Because you know this, vibes are not votes. You have to translate that momentum into actual, reality.
They are and they're not. I mean, because we talk about get out the vote. We talk about sort of the structural side of that and bus and how we reach out. But if you have to drag people to vote, that's not going to work. Right now, vibes are making people more interested, more engaged, more willing. There's a sense of spirit and pride. That doesn't happen with all due respect, policy details. That happens.
You're talking to a nerd here, just so you know.
I'm like an old DLC. The best politics is a better idea guy. But we've seen this in the past. It's momentum. It's directional. It's energy. It's passion, and that brings action. And so I think this is The phones are lighting up. You've heard this, and Republicans have to acknowledge this. Look at the small daughter voting. We're finally winning online. We're finally waking up young kids that live online that are paying a little bit more attention and seeing something in her they didn't see with Joe Biden. We're starting to see a different interest level, and if she can carry that, if she can capture that spirit, she can bottle that through hard-headed pragmatism and prosecuting the case against Trump, because all of us know this guy is more than capable of coming back with ferocity in the next days, weeks, certainly months.
So as it speaks to prosecuting that case both tonight and in the weeks to come here, how do you think she will rhetorically speak about him tonight? Because we've heard it run the gamut, right? From very sort of sweepy statements and a couple oblique references from Oprah to some pretty sharp stuff from former President Obama with the leaf blower comment, Hakeem Jeffries saying he's like a bad ex-boyfriend, the diminishment of former President Trump. Is she going to go there?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know what to expect in that case. Okay. I mean, you can't do everything.
Have you talked to her this week?
I was
How's she feeling?
I was trying to get Doug to tell me last night a little bit about the speech.
What's the mood? I mean,
the mood's just unbelievable optimism, but also deep understanding of what comes next. I mean, everybody's obviously we're focused on tonight, but we're all focused on tomorrow and the next few weeks and months.
And when we talk about prosecuting that case, that debate is coming up real quick. I mean, Philly's coming up in just a couple of weeks.
I wouldn't ever worry about her in a debate. I mean, one thing I know about her, she comes prepared in debates. Her ability to deliver a message, deliver a line, a counterpunch, a punch. Trump clearly now is becoming more prepared for this debate than he has in the past. He is preparing for this debate because he knows how ferocious she is in a debate. I think she's going to do exceptionally well in the debate.
What's your role in the next 2.5 months?
Yes.
What's your role in January if she wins?
Yes, and.
Would you accept a role in her administration?
My role in the administration is to deliver for California, deliver for more American people than any other state in the nation, besides the 21 state populations combined, to make her a success by being successful on behalf of 40 million Americans, regardless of whether or not they voted for a Democrat. We believe everybody wants to be protected, respected, and connected. Kamala Harris doesn't talk past people or down people. She wants to be a president like Joe Biden, I believe, for all Americans.
I know you're endlessly sick of this question and the speculation about your own ambitions. Are you even thinking about let's say 32?
Well, 2028, I look forward to re-electing Kamala Harris.
Why I didn't say.
In 2032, I hope to be walking without a cane.
Okay. I know you got to go. Governor, thank you for being with us. I really appreciate it. We look forward to seeing the speech tonight, and I know you'll have a front row seat. Front row?
This is the benefit of being from California.
Okay. Governor, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Lots going on here tonight. We're going to let him sneak back down. We're going to go back down to the floor where Monica Alba is. And we understand, Monica, as things are now officially started on night 4. We've seen the invocation. We've seen the beginning of this thing kick off. And now they're playing a video. What's next? What is the expectation for the sort of pre-prime time event here? As we know, gun violence, for example, is going to be one of those issues front and center.
Absolutely, Hallie. You're going to be hearing a lot about tonight, and that is under the theme of For Our Future. And I'm told that the vice president is going to be talking about some of those issues as well. But tonight, they want to have a couple of folks who were in the Veep stakes discussion, but who we haven't heard from yet. People like Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona, who can speak to some of his experience working with Vice President Harris. People like Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who took herself out of the running, but certainly some of the people who Democrats will identify as other potential leaders and the future of the party. So there's a little bit of a nod to that as well tonight in some of the remarks. And Hallie, I just learned a little bit more information that I can tell you about something that's interesting, which is the vice president and President Biden discussed her speech tonight. Remember that in the last couple of days, they're still both doing their official duties, right? They had a call with Prime Minister Netanyahu that the vice president, in addition to doing everything she's doing in Chicago this week, she beamed into it to be on it with the president as well. So certainly there's been the official business of the White House, of the president and the vice president, but the two compared notes a little bit on this speech, and she certainly is someone who will nod to the president's leadership, but it also comes from a place of, you've been here before, you gave that acceptance speech 4 years ago, so do you have some pointers for me? And then another piece of color that's new to us, Hallie, is a key speechwriter whose name is Megan Rooney, who worked in the White House for years. She left 2 weeks ago to join the Harris campaign and become the vice president's head speechwriter. And I'm told she has had a really major role in crafting the speech tonight. So just think about that. Somebody who has spent the last few years trying to channel the president's voice, Joe Biden's voice, now doing that for the vice president. So I think there will be some themes, some Biden-Harris administration sections that seem familiar. But of course, the vice president has never appeared on a stage in a night quite like this one, and the energy is electric. I'm looking around, Hallie. Almost every single seat around me is packed, and it is still very early in the evening. Much more to come.
Oh, I didn't get it. Monica Alba down there on the floor. Thank you very much. As the sound of Beyonce rings out behind us on Freedom, let's bring in our panel. Puck senior political correspondent Tara Palmieri is here with us. San Francisco Chronicle Washington correspondent Shira Stein, and of course Chuck Todd in the seat that is now your home. We'll send your mail there.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
I need to get more steps in. I'm a little behind. I think it's to the gym this morning.
Tara and Shira, it's good to see you. Let me bring you guys into the conversation here, but I do want to warn folks, we will listen in to the next couple of speakers here. But very quickly, Tara, you've been here all week. What has stood out to you the most? What has surprised you about this convention?
Well, actually, I was feeling like I was having deja vu from the convention 6 weeks ago in Milwaukee. Like just this feeling of like unbridled optimism, like there's already a victory, and it's almost like everyone's here feeling like they've already won, and maybe they feel like they've won because they've moved on from Biden in a very seamless way, but we are still in a coin toss of an election, and just like the split screen right now, where they do seem really unified. They have AOC on the floor, and they have some of the more renegades getting speaking spots, and it's really been flawless up until this moment, so really Kamala Harris has to land it. And then on the other side, in the Trump world, they're just kind of spinning out right now, trying to figure out how to get the narrative back on them. And internally, they're figuring out who's even leading their campaign.
Do you think they have a playbook for her, for Kamala Harris?
No, but I do know from my sources that Trump feels like he has the right to be personal and to go personal, because after this convention and the number of times where he has been made fun of, mocked, demeaned, he thinks it's only fair to attack back, even if it hurts him. And then so many of his advisors are saying, like, you don't need to be fair, let's just win, right?
He's essentially saying that publicly. I mean, he said yesterday, oh, they're telling me to stick to policy, but Democrats aren't doing that. Democrats are going after me in what he sees as these personal terms.
Yeah, absolutely. I expect to see some of that from speakers tonight. I don't know if we'll see it from the vice president herself. I think a lot of times when we get these sorts of attacks, it comes better from surrogates or other folks on the campaign. I think she's going to focus on a message of unity and patriotism and some of the narratives that we've been hearing throughout this convention, law and order, family values, these things that are traditionally thought of as Republican messaging tools that Democrats have really tried to reclaim this week.
What haven't we talked about that we should be talking about?
Great, thanks for that. Just throw that out.
Okay, I'll let you. I mean, I'll give you a beat on that one.
No, look, I mean, it is. I thought Tara just made a good point, because I literally am in the middle of writing this same thing. Like both conventions, in the moment, everybody felt happy and euphoric.
The energy
I will
was
say,
insane.
in hindsight, it turns out the Republican convention was a total missed opportunity. They really blew it. Their belief that it was over allowed them to pick J.D. Vance. That turned out not to help. They doubled down on trying to get their base vote out. They doubled down on trying to get the young male vote, right? They brought in Dana White. They brought in Hulk Hogan. They did all this stuff. One night of Nikki Haley, right?
It was like CPAC.
It was a CPAC convention. It's a great way of putting it. You're absolutely right. And you're sitting there, and now in the moment, they were happy. Looking back at that convention, what a big miss. And here's the irony. They are the ones that said, oh, they're going to switch out Biden. But they didn't believe their own rhetoric because they were not prepared for this moment at all.
Because they haven't recalibrated, Chuck. You talk about the strategy being to turn out these young male vote. Look at the Theo Vaughn interview. They
have this obsession and in a 48-48 race, that makes sense. But here's the problem. In a two-person race, and this is what Trump ran into in 2020. Look, in 2016, there were plenty of third-party candidates that could lower his winning number. Donald Trump has always had a ceiling. It's been 47 to 48. And now there's less third party. I don't know if 47 or 48 is a winning number anymore. And he did nothing at his convention to get that ceiling raised to 49 or 50.
I want to let folks know, if you're like, okay, looks like there's a party happening on the convention floor. That's because there kind of is. This is DJ Metro taking the stage here as kind of the MC, one of the MCs of the evening, moving forward. The crowd seems to like it. And Shira, you've been here all week looking behind me.
Oh my
goodness. It's full, right? It wasn't necessarily like this during the opening half hour earlier.
There were lines for the last 3 hours to get in. Have you noticed this?
I've been in here.
Yeah,
I saw it coming in.
I'm doing the back and forth, and even coming every night. I mean, so everybody wanted to get in early. They don't.
Yeah. I know somebody was here like 4 or 5 hours ago saving a spot like right up in the front of the California delegation.
Focus on Education here with Becky Pringle, the president of the National Education Association, and Randy Weingarten, the president of the American Federation of Teachers. We're going to listen into these remarks now.
Education Association. As an 8th grade science teacher for over 30 years, I can tell you that Kamala Harris and teacher Tim Walz understand when our public schools are strong, our nation is strong. They know expanding free school meals, investing in healthcare, and keeping our communities and our schools safe creates opportunity for everyone. They will strengthen our schools, support our educators, and help our students live into their brilliance. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are not just wrong, they're dangerous. It's all right there in Project 2025. They will shut down the Department of Education, end Head Start, and make educators pay a higher percentage in taxes than billionaires. But we are coming together to say, not on our watch. Not on our watch. So we will organize, and we will mobilize, and we will win all the things. So come this January, we will have a president who sees us, who believes in us, and who knows the beauty and the power of this diverse democracy. And her name is Kamala Harris.
I'm Randy Weingarten, the president of the AFT and a public school teacher. One of my first lessons I taught my students was about the social contract, how both individual freedoms and mutual responsibility are essential in our democracy. This covenant underlies our commitment to public schools, where educators prepare students to spark innovations, steward the environment, create our arts, and shape our democracy. Now, one of the first lessons my students taught me was, you gotta walk the walk. That means Donald Trump and J.D. Vance can't claim they're pro-child while gutting funding for public schools. That means that being pro-family means we support access to good union jobs, affordable housing, health care, and higher education. That's what Kamala Harris and Tim the classroom and the courtroom. America, with Kamala Harris as our president, our best days are ahead.
Yeah.
Next speaker set to take the stage, California Senator Alex Padilla. Shira Stein, who covers California with us, is here. What should we expect to hear from him?
Senator Padilla has been friends with Vice President Harris for years. He replaced her in the Senate. I think we're going to hear some of him talking about their personal story, but also talking about the similarities in their background and in their upbringing, even though they are very different in some ways.
Let's listen in. Senator Padilla speaking now.
Buenas noches, demócratas. My name is Alex Padilla, and I am so proud to represent the great state of California in the United States Senate. But the titles I'm most proud of are husband to my beautiful wife, Angela, and father to 3 young gentlemen. Now, as a father, when we talk about the future of our country, it's not just hypothetical. For me, it is very real. Every day I go to work in Washington, I think about my kids and the future we're building for their generation. And to show you how Kamala Harris will treat America's kids as president, I'll tell you how she treats mine. Because whenever she sees Roman, Alejandro, and Diego, she greets them with kindness and respect, literally meeting them on their level, to speak to them and to listen. And every fight that Kamala and I have taken on together has been about making life better for this generation and the next. As a state senator, I stood with then Attorney General Harris as she took on the big banks to keep kids and their families in their homes. As California's Secretary of State, I knew her as a fearless United States Senator and my partner in defending our sacred right to vote. That's right. And when Kamala became vice president, I was honored to fill her seat. But I knew that I had some big Chuck Taylors to fill. But I was proud to carry on legislation that she championed to protect workers, to safeguard public lands, to provide kids with more quality education. You see, Kamala and I believe that all of our kids deserve a shot at the American dream.
Huber, what's that?
You have been listening to California Senator Alex Padilla as we are here officially in night 4, the final night of the Democratic National Convention, live in Chicago. We will be bringing you the special coverage all night long. More of it picking up right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.